This story involves my colleague Margaret, and it was witnessed by all the office staff. It even has a funny twist to it. We were all on vacation together at a corporate party, and the bosses went all out to make it a memorable event. The party had everything: an amazing host, exciting contests, and a wide variety of drinks. We had an absolute blast, discussing the highs and lows of the company throughout the year. It was a fantastic time all around. However, as they say, all good things must come to an end. Eventually, it was time for us to head home. Our management had thoughtfully arranged for cars to pick us up. I was still relatively composed and able to carry on conversations, but Margaret was struggling. She needed assistance getting into the back seat of the cab, and then she tried her best to give the driver her address. In her slightly slurred speech, Margaret tried to explain. It's like her street, like a celebration. It's hard to explain. The driver, clearly regretting that he ended up with the most intoxicated person from our company in his car, responded, "I'm not really sure what you mean, to be honest." Margaret persisted, "It's the, March 8th Street, March 8, house number 10. It's near a river." And with that somewhat coherent explanation, my colleague's attempt at communication came to an end. As I watched the cabs drive away, I couldn't help but wonder how Margaret would be feeling the next day. I imagined it wouldn't be pleasant. To my surprise, I spotted her at the cafeteria during lunch the following day. However, she was a far cry from the cheerful and spirited girl we all knew. Instead, she was sitting with a friend, sobbing as she recounted the rest of the story from the previous night. And she did so loudly enough for almost the entire dining room to catch a glimpse of the humorous details. I arrived at Edgeworth's house with a mixture of surprise and disbelief. I accidentally called his address from memory. Being under the influence of alcohol, he was in love with me. However, I couldn't make sense of the conversation I had overheard. Someone was surprised, perhaps because they expected her to come home. My husband had met me in a similar state before, so this was nothing new. Margaret, who I had often heard in conversations with coworkers about my husband, continued her story. We went to bed, and I thought I would fall asleep at home in my husband's arms. But in the middle of the night, I kept getting persistent phone calls. Frustrated, I answered the call but found someone shouting at me. In my drunken state, I mistakenly thought it was Edward and confidently confronted him, asked him why he was yelling at me, and told him that I told him I was going home because my husband was waiting for me. I demanded that he never call again. But how could I explain the suspicious calls from unknown men throughout the night? There was silence in the room. Marguerite's friend shrieked fearfully, and I almost choked on my tea from shock. Everyone was eager to know how the story would develop. My friend was the first to break the silence, asking, "Well, what happened next?" Margaret sobbed. I sobered up abruptly, realizing it was just a dream. I looked at Edward, who was lying next to me, and he was looking at me, and my husband was still silent on the phone. I tried to say something, but he interrupted, suggesting we discuss it at home. I left it at that and started to get ready to go home. When I got home, I found my husband waiting for me. Now he knew I hadn't been late at work. Everyone sat in anticipation, wanting to know how the story would end. Yeah, after work I'm packing up my stuff and going to my parents' place. I have no idea what awaits me there. Anyway, lunch break is over. Time to get back to work. You go ahead. I still need to make a quick stop to freshen up and tidy up. With those words, the girls left the dining room, leaving everyone in silent confusion. It had come to everyone's attention that Margaret would now have to face the consequences. It took me a while to process what I had heard, but finally I followed my colleagues into the office. Margaret always seemed so responsible and calm at work. I reflected. Who would have thought she had such hidden depths? That's what happens when you lead a double life and can't hide your secrets for long.